to start the introduction of welcome of everyone.
Yes. Thank you, Kelly. I am Pradeep Haldar. I'm a faculty at the Patel College of Global Sustainability, and it is my pleasure to welcome Al Lachman as our guest speaker, our spring 2021 guest speaker here today. Al is the CEO of Ecoterium, which is based in California. He brings a very innovative and visionary approach to both business and basically architecture, design, consulting, product development, technology, etc. He's going to be talking to you today about incentivizing sustainability efforts that elevate humanity. And looking at his background, I see that Al has spent a substantial amount of time in actually designing and implementing solar systems. He has over 300 of them under his belt. So he's a very experienced person and knowledgeable about solar. I know some of the students in my class have been taking and doing analysis of solar for implementation in the Florida area. So I'm sure some of you can learn from Al and or ask some of the right questions. With that, Al, I'll pass it over to you. You can basically talk about get the project the talk started.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Haldor, and thank you everyone. Thank you, Kelly and Deepak and all the organizers. I'm very honored to be here. Very excited to, like Dr. Haldor said, you know, I am very passionate about this, and you know, it's fun to be able to work in what you're passionate about. So, you know, like hours and hours pass, you know, putting all this work and it's just like having fun, you know. It's like having a party. So thank you once again, everyone. And so with that said, I am about to start sharing my presentation. So one thing, at the end, we're gonna have a call to action and we're gonna have a FAQ. So we'll spend a little time, you know, of course, talking about what we're gonna discuss today. And then of course, it would be great to get some of your feedback and of course, you know, work into some potential next steps. I do know that Kelly wanted to talk a little bit about how the admin of this presentation is gonna work out. So please, Kelly, if you can help me out here with some of the.
Thank you, Al. Well, welcome to every participant today. We just have a couple of administrative notes. Right now, everybody should be on mute, and Al is going to go ahead and run through the presentation. He does have different areas where he would like your input. So if you would like to speak, if you'll raise your hand and he'll call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and then remute. That way we don't get a lot of interference on the call. So I appreciate that. And Al, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so I'm about to open the presentation here. And then I'm gonna share it with Deepak real quick. Sorry about that, just in case. Here we go. All right. That's Deepak's email. And okay. Share. Always a plan B, especially in solar energy and all these complicated technologies. All right. Okay. Perfect. Okay, opening my presentation and about to start here. So I'd like to start I'd like to start the presentation with a question. like, what kind of future do you envision? Like, what kind of future would you like to see? And so I'm going to show you some of my own ideas, or, you know, from artists that have rendered some very interesting visions of the future. And so almost there here. Okay, here we go. And some of these are images from today, you know. So, you know, this is a building in Italy, right? You've probably seen it. It's all over the internet, right? It's a vertical garden, vertical farm building type. Then, of course, you know, there's some very interesting renderings out there of visions of architects, like elevating things higher up from the ground, so that we don't disturb nature, for example, right? And then we start getting more futuristic. Hopefully, you know, we get rid of the highways and the streets as well, and then we start flying, and then we disturb nature even less, and then we start taking advantage of vertical construction so that we can take even less space. To me, that's huge. I will tell you more about myself, but I wanted to show you this first. And then, of course, you know, here you see some of those ideas, right? Yeah, you see some cars that we're probably not going to go from, you know, driving in the ground to flying in a couple of years, but, you know, there's probably going to be both. But we want to minimize that, right? And make it as green as possible in the ground. And then, you know, hopefully we're going to start, you know, going to other planets as well, right? Because once we start overpopulating, you know, hopefully we're going to go to the moon, and we're going to go to maybe some of the other moons in the solar system, or even Mars, right? And, you know, here's, I really like this image because it just starts showing architecture and construction kind of like molding with nature, right? And that's, I feel this is kind of like the future that that I like to see. And then, of course, here it's even more so, like, things start growing kind of like the way nature grows as well. So, like, oops, sorry. So what are the visions? Like, I like to hear from you all, like, out of these images, I mean, does anything capture your attention, or, you know, what kind of future would you like to see, or you envision? Anyone volunteer? Okay, kind of quiet, or let's see.
We got a hand up here, so let me let's see. Who is this?
Jasmine?
Yes, Jasmine, go ahead.
Hi. I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but, you know, I think the idea is to progress toward a society where, like, everyone can enjoy these things. So that means ending so many of the issues that currently exist, starting with, you know, hunger and poverty and sanitation at, like, a very basic level. So I feel like, you know, in order to achieve this clean, good future, we have to resolve those problems as well. Or, like, at least to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Great, Jasmine. Thank you so much for bringing up the social issues and for bringing, you know, equality and fairness for everyone. That is definitely important. It's not just the physical, but definitely the social and the emotional aspect of all this. I agree. And anyone else? Kelly, if since I cannot see if someone's raising their hands or not, if you, I don't know how much pause should I give. And then if no one raises their hand, just let me know, and then I'll just carry on. Like, I don't know, like 15, 20.
Certainly. I do not see any hands. We also have the chat box for our participants. If they would like to include a comment in the chat box, I'd be happy to read that as well. But I do not see any other hands up.
Okay, very good. So, very good. So basically, my background is architecture. I've been working for over 20 years in architecture, construction, project development, and I began working in architecture. I went into the side of technology in architecture, and but then that sort of, but also project development, the financing side, and that sort of like led me into renewable energy investments, and it's been great. I saw this presentation, you've probably seen it, where it shows the map of the US and it shows a little square the size of a city. If you cover that little square with solar panels, you could power the whole country. So that's how I started getting involved in renewable energy. But then I thought that, hey, there should be a way to, it's not just solar, right? It's so many other things. And so it's important to make a big impact, a huge impact. And that's when I started coming up with a way that I could try to make a bigger impact and not just participate in or collaborate with solar energy, but also with the other sustainability industries and activities and things that are that actually combine them all, right? So with that said, I started a company called Ecotarium. So I'm the CEO. And we're a startup right now, but we do have some experience, and we're doing some interesting work. And that's this company here. This is our logo. This used to be our mission statement. It used to be empower humanity to be sustainable and self-sufficient. And now we're changing that to more of a incentivizing humanity with sustainable activities that sustainable activities that help not only the environment but also like help people improve their lives and the environment, like I said, right? So we started thinking, okay, what are the problems that we want to tackle, right? Like, so we identified some problems here, and once again, I'd like to hear from you guys, like, do you identify, like, if you wanted to point out, like, okay, what are the problems that are affecting humanity? Like, from where do we need to elevate? What is the problem, right? So we identified some very important problems here, but I'd like to hear from you all, if you identify with any of these, and if you would like to add a few others. What do you all think? Is this like it? I mean, does this encompass everything, or there's something else that I'm missing here?
We do have a student with a question.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that education, having people understand like sustainability or the problems that we have in today's world.
Great, perfect. Definitely. And I think what I was trying to do here was, for example, where I say, like, limitation, I think education is definitely part of that, right? Like, people are very limited as to what they can accomplish because they don't have enough education. So I completely agree. Education, maybe instead of limitation, it should be education, right? But at the same time, some people do get educated and then they're limited by other factors too. So I thought that limitation could kind of like encompass that, but then of course inequalities is, for example, another of those factors, right? Anyone else wants to add anything else? All right. So to me, these problems, for example, we have pollution. that's definitely, of course, you all have heard of Anthropocene, right? Like we are affecting the world in a way that it's just changing the environment drastically. And so pollution is one of those big problems. And then deforestation is related, but at the same time, it's just it's an act in itself that it's contributing to probably more death of life than any other thing, right? And then, of course, the inequality that is more of a social problem. And it's a problem of like not being able to share the same ideas or ideologies, and that's creating a lot of different problems in different parts of the world. But it's also maybe a side effect of freedom in a way, right? Some people just choose to live a certain way, and it's hard to change people, or it's hard for everyone to have everything in common. And then, of course, like I mentioned, limitation. I think that's a massive problem too. Some people are they just don't have, all they can do is just survive in whichever way they can. And then you put all these things together, and that's creating a lot of stress. And especially in the, in one end, having so much complexities and being in the level of extreme capitalism in a way that is taking us to a level that we cannot even handle anymore, of work, of too many complications, complexities. And then, of course, the other problems are creating, people that are very mad, and there's a lot of anger and anguish in the world. So these are the main problems. So we thought, like, hey, if we want to make a big impact, especially with sustainability, and tackle all the United Nations sustainable goals, right? Like we need to address all of these things, right? So now that becomes a very difficult thing to do. Like, how can we, that's a very huge endeavor to be able to tackle all this, right? So that's where, it's taken us many years to figure out some solutions, and that's why we need collaboration and help and feedback. But at the same time, we've worked really hard to try to like narrow it down. So Ecotarium, the last part of Ecotarium, therium, that therium is like, it comes from bacterium, right? It's like a little tiny organism, right? Like probably the first life in Earth, and that it's tiny little particles that start combining and start creating other life and start changing the world, right? So that's kind of where our name came from, and we like that analogy of or metaphor of between Ecotarium and an organism. So with that said, we start putting together our DNA. So our DNA is three main pillars that are gonna help us propel humanity to where we need to be. And we feel that those things are sustainability, self-sufficiency, and automation. Sustainability tackles, this upper globe here, this blob figure here, and sustainability will help with pollution and deforestation, right? And then, but of course, these things overlap. So self-sufficiency is going to help not only to people to be more self-sufficient and be able to take care of themselves, so they can be better and not be a weight to society in a way, but at the same time contribute. And so self-sufficiency is also about like growing your own food and so forth. So doing it the right way can help deforestation as well. And then, of course, it's going to help with inequality and limitations, because if people are empowered to take care of themselves with, for example, education, as was mentioned, or with, having the social skills and the social understanding to help others by helping themselves, then we can tackle inequality and limitations. And then automation, technology, it's important, right? Like we need to get help from technology to be able to do more of this. And and to free up our time. And that's why I put in that category of problems that automation is going to solve or help solve is stress, right? So what are some of these solutions that can help solve these problems that are part of these categories or these pillars or the DNA? Well, that DNA starts creating an organism, and so we call these the organs. The organs of our startup of Ecotarium are these solutions. And once again, it starts getting very complicated. It's a lot of things to tackle. But clean energy, definitely, it's going to help with pollution. Anything related to renewables, not just energy, but of course, being able to use renewable materials and so forth. Then permaculture. Permaculture is huge. Look, it's helping not only pollution, but it's also helping deforestation, right? If we can farm differently. And then sustainable planning, which means the way we design, the way we do urban planning, architecture, engineering, and so forth. And then, of course, there is something interesting happens here. Then once these start combining themselves, kind of like a molecule, right? And then you get a combination of many of these, and you get vertical farming. So all of a sudden, vertical farming, it's the only one that it's intersecting all of the blobs here, vertical farming. It helps with pollution, deforestation, self-sufficiency, and of course, it solves people having their own food and so forth, right? And same thing, 3D printing is almost in that category too. Of course, there's some things that 3D printing still needs to tackle, right? Like the use of more sustainable materials and so forth. And then, of course, I still keep fairness and opportunity there as a word, not as a solution or a description of the solution. So we still need to come up with ways. And as Jasmine mentioned, right, the social and the quality situation, right? Like, okay, what are some of the social ideas that can help with this, right? Like to keep it fair and give other people opportunities too. And then, of course, all the time-saving applications and technology. And then the result of all that should be leisure. And leisure is important because if we can provide all this, and people can be empowered with these three pillars, then there's going to be more leisure, and then leisure is going to contribute to more conversations, more things like this, right? Like more interaction, more sharing of ideas and collaboration, so that we can come up with better solutions. So it's a cycle, right? We give ourselves more time, and then with that time, we keep improving the solutions. So here's some images that show some of these ideas, and then with that said, then once again, right, we have the problem of how do we tackle all this, right? Like it's a lot. It's a lot to put on a plate. And so what we started doing then, it's like, okay, let's try to organize this, right? So we started like grouping these things, like trying to organize it in a cleaner way. And it's like, okay, right now it's like a blob, right? Like, okay, let's start moving these blobs and see what kind of shape we can come up with. And we came up with sort of like a Venn diagram, right? And you could see how vertical farming is right there in the middle, and you could see how they start kind of like grouping themselves. And then you see some intersections that have nothing in them, right? So then, we come up with three simple things that are sort of like our focus to get started, right? It's, generate your own energy, clean energy, of course, grow your own food, and fabricate your own things. And then, of course, these three intersect. And of course, there's other things like vertical farming that intersect all three. But these intersections become really interesting, right? Like, how does food and energy combine? How does food and fabrication combine? How does energy and fabrication combine, right? And then in the background are the things that can do all of these things in one, right? Like a startup, like different startups, right? Like we would love to collaborate with other startups that are trying to tackle these problems. Collaborate and fund them or help them partner with them. And then, of course, products, different technologies that we can develop that combine these things. And of course, property development. As I said, that's one of my passions, and I think it's one of the best ways that we can really make a big impact by changing the way we develop land, and especially, real estate, but also farms and energy projects. So, does anyone want to add anything or have any questions about the way we've assembled and group these things? Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say grow your own food, generate your own energy, are you just talking about individually or in the community that you're in, like a local level or state level?
Yeah, great question. I'm really glad you brought that up. I wish I had more time to show you some of the graphics that show how this could evolve. And definitely, because just individually, that's not human nature, right? Human nature is to be social and to collaborate, to contribute, and so to make and individually we cannot make a bigger impact. However, that's how we have to start. So this is just our initial focus, but then as things start grouping, that's why we have this in the background, right? Like we definitely need to group communities, and just like evolution, right? Like how organisms started combining with each other symbiotically, things started getting organized and more complex and more advanced. So definitely the community, and then and the community needs to be empowered too, precisely for those reasons that we've mentioned a couple of times as equality and opportunity, right? Like sometimes corporations just have a lot of power, right? And so we need to empower the communities as well in a more local level. I hope that answers your question. I'll show you some ways we're doing this. And does anyone else have any other comment or question, or you want to follow up on my answer? Make a comment. All right. Well, so with that said, the next thing is like, okay, why now? Well, at this point, I think it's pretty obvious, right? We're sort of like having it's like a convergence of crises that are happening, right? So just like the solutions are a combination of solutions, the problems are also a combination of problems, right? So it's kind of like the balance of the universe. There's a negative and there's a positive, but at the same time, it's like, okay, how can we group all that for humanity to evolve in a positive way? So the why now, I'm going to go back to the beginning. And has anyone seen the show Cosmos on the Disney Channel? Or it's part of the Disney group. I think it's their documentary.
The Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very interesting, right? So,
yeah,
and the funny thing is, like, not to brag or anything, but I began putting this graphic before I saw the show. And I was like, wait, this guy spent millions of dollars to show this idea. And so I'm going to show you something similar as in that show. I recommend the show. It's great. You should see it. It's a lot of episodes. But I was thinking about the exact same thing in the way that I wanted to explain it. And actually, it took me 2 years to come up with this graphic. Not that it took me 2 years to draw it, but to think about it and everything, right? And to come to a conclusion that it's actually not on that show. So basically, of course, the universe began 14.5 billion years ago. There was, 13.5. That was the Big Bang, right? And this 3x thing, it's, you could divide those 13.5 billions of years in three thirds. So one of them is it took like the first third is 4.5 billion years it took for the galaxies to develop. I mean, imagine all that time, right? And almost nothing happening, just like collisions and reactions, and then it took another 2/3 for the solar system to become a solar system. And then the Earth, of course, started there 4.5 billion years ago. And then it took 7x, right? Then we divide that in 7x, 7 times. It's about 600 million years ago that we went from being a rock to the bacteria that I was mentioning, right? To unicellular organisms, to a more complex life. So it's the exponential factor is 7, right? And 600 million years ago, that's when the organisms started organizing themselves and creating, plants, fungi, multicellular microorganisms. And then the first animal, I've read some places say it was like a worm, but other places it says it's a sponge, and apparently the sponge wins. And you all probably seen SpongeBob, right? The show SpongeBob. So there has to be something else to that show, because I mean they're showing the first animal. SpongeBob is the first animal, right? And so sponges were the first ones, and they're kind of like came out of like minerals, right? Like out of rocks almost, right? And they started growing inside, and then the organisms started using these minerals, and like then we have like sea snails, but then some of them started like just like crawling around and swimming around, but then the insects started making more complex things with these minerals, and started like almost like building themselves things that are functional. And then we started crawling into the Earth, and then so the exponential factor here is 10x. Things just start getting faster, more complexity, more DNA, more interaction, right? To the point where then the animals and the insects started changing the environment. And if it wasn't because of bees and pollination, there would not be flowers and fruits. So they started changing the environment. And then you divide that by 10, 600 million divided by 10, and then we have primates. Now we have hands, right? And then with these hands, things start getting faster and faster. And then you divide that by 10 again. And then you have the first great apes, the bigger apes, right? The gorillas, the orangutans. That's 6 million years ago. And then you divide that by 10 again. And then you have the first human 600,000 years ago. And things kept going at that speed. And just like the mollusks and the insects started building things, we started building things too. And we started drawing things, but we started doing something different. We started interpreting nature into our own way. And that's how we started like doing art, music. Then we started using or building things that are like resemble things from nature, but that are useful to cook. And then we started, once again, representing nature, right? Representing ourselves. And then what happened here? 10x, 6,000 years ago, farming and writing, right? That made a huge change that accelerated things even faster. And then you divide that by another 10. Once again, the 10x factor, right? 6,000 divided by 10 is 600 years ago, the Renaissance. And with the Renaissance, all the ideas started combining, just like the animals started combining minerals, and we started combining objects and things. With the Renaissance, we started combining ideas. Of course, the writing had a lot to do with that, and the art, the representation, right? And then you divide that by another 10, the 600, and we come up with 60 years ago. Guess what happened? Computers, right? So computers, the age of information. So if you divide 60 by 10, what do you have? 6 years. So what is going to happen? What do you all think is going to happen? If I mean, you divide 6 by 10 and it's like 6 years. I mean, 6 by 10, it's like not even a year. So what are we heading into? Have any of you heard of singularity? Anyone? You know what singularity is? Anyone wants to give it a shot? All right, so singularity is basically that we're turning into machines. And artificial intelligence is going to take over. So, hey, you know what? It kind of makes sense, right? If 60 divided by 10 is 6, and then 6, it's like, oh, we're running out of time. So then, boop, kaput, humankind just disappears. So here's my conclusion. My conclusion is that we have to slow down. That's the only way. And we do not want to go into singularity. Some people still advocate for that. Maybe we can use some of that technology, but I think it's better if we just slow down with sustainability, and we do something called the neo-renaissance, which you've probably heard, which is a recombination of ideas again. And now we start combining the technologies, the sciences. So now it's a more complex combination, solar energy, wind power, all the food things that we're learning, all the health things that we're learning, all the automation things, tidal energy, right? And then once we slow down, then we start integrating these things effectively, vertical farming, 3D printing buildings. And then, of course, that should lead to also better design so that we can regenerate nature. And then we go back to nature. And so this point here of singularity is kind of like what this is over here, right? Like life. It's like, oh, the end of life, let's go back to the beginning of life. And then let's go in reverse. So 7 times slower. So now the 6, instead of like dividing it by 10, we multiply by 7, and that's 42 years to do this. And then once we get there and everything is integrated and regenerated, with the new cities of the future and so forth, who knows what's going to happen, but I call it transcendence. And then we should go back to the universe. And then, of course, that's, possibly going to another planet. And then possibly, going to other places in the galaxy. And then who knows what's going to happen over here, but there's some great visions out there. So what we want to concentrate on is on these 42 years right here, especially what we're doing right now, which is what your school is doing, for example, is combining and doing diversity of things, of sciences, of technologies. And then we're combining those things. And now it's time to act and integrate them. So very challenging, very difficult to change humanity. So how do we do it? Well, we've come up with a product, and we call it the transcendent rewarding system. And so it's not just about the science and the technology, it's about the emotional and the psychology. Like, we cannot just make humans change. It's not happening. So, there's a very, any of you heard of Christian Eisenstein? He's written some very interesting books. My favorite quote from him: technology wants to control and replace nature, just like in the same way that culture wants to supersede and control human nature. So we have to change culture, and we have to get right in there in the psychology of human beings. So what we've done here is combine, I don't know if you heard of this, it's called the Mayor's Wheel of Life. It's a way to keep balance in life, because, hey, one of the only ways to change things or changing habits, it's by being it's by making not only rewarding, by feeling that you're rewarded with every positive change, but also making it fun, right? So if we're just like work, even though it's fun, I mean, we cannot forget about our loved ones, our social life, our career, our physical environment, our health. So the Wheel of Life has these 8 categories. And then, so that's the self-improvement side, or the coaching side of life, right? And then, of course, there's the needs, the psychological needs. So you probably heard of the Maslow pyramid, and he goes from, the physiological needs to then the safety needs, to the social needs, the esteem, and then at the top is self-actualization, and that's kind of like self-sufficiency, right? When we can, be fulfilled and then help others too. So we do a cross-section of that. So on the first level, the wheel of life intersects every level of the Maslow pyramid, and then we come up with 8 times 5, 40 categories. Where, for example, this lower wheel here has the combination of health with physiological, balancing love with physiological needs, balancing social life with physiological needs, and so forth. So how can we, and so here's our new mission statement, incentivizing sustainable activities that provide life balance and satisfy a need for self-improvement. So once people go into our application, into our system, and you start clicking around, you're going to have recommendations of what to do. And of course, a lot of these things have to do with everything has to do with being sustainable and regenerating the world. So it's going to lead you into some of the activities that we're working on, of course. It is a business, but at the same time, it's a very important endeavor and something we're very passionate about. Like, we really want to contribute with the elevation of humanity. And so we feel like this is the way, or one way, but this is a way that it could happen because it has the psychology of it behind it. And so what we're doing, the front is, we go with the lower hanging fruit, right? Solar systems. We're doing a lot of solar systems. We do lead generation. A lot of the activities are ways that you could combine all these things that I was just mentioning, but of course, in a way that will lead to people to go solar, or things that will help people build their own solar systems, or and of course, there's a lot of science behind this, and so there's a lot of learning, a lot of teamwork. And so, we want to get people to collaborate in that way, but at the same time, get rewarded as they do it. And then, of course, the other thing that we have a lot of experience with is developing solar in large scale. And the reason we still do this, this doesn't look very sustainable. This is like this project is from 7 years ago, so we've come a long way in making these things better. But the main thing is it's replacing fossil fuel, and it's clean power, and then of course it makes a lot of money, and the money is important so we can reinvest it. So this is I interconnected this power plant. It's a 12 megawatt. I travel all the way to Panama. That's the moment right there on the left, lower left. That's the moment where we're connecting it to the grid. And so this was very exciting. And then this is the second one that we've participated. As you can see, evolution, right? Like more trees. We're trying to get the most trees that we can. And right now there's no way. Some of the products that we want to develop are, of course, vertical solar systems. But amazing. These buildings you see to the left are the buildings that this power plant is powering. So it's amazing. I mean, look at the size of those buildings and look at all the power that needs, right? Of course, solar systems are getting more efficient. And but this is the reality. This power plant is powering those buildings you see right there. It's like a mall, a hotel, and 3 skyscrapers. And then these are some of the ideas that we're working on project development. So we're trying to integrate things, right? We're trying to integrate maybe like I said, vertical type solar systems, and then combine solar systems with hydroponic plants. So this is another project we're working on. And of course, we want to help this customer generate his own energy and grow their own food. So as I mentioned, I know sorry it took so long, but maybe we have a few minutes for FAQ, and then I'd like to share my email so that, you know, we're looking for collaborators, we're looking for internships that you know, the reward system, help us with our solar projects, help us with the combining the projects and products. So we need collaborators. If you're interested in internship, I'd love to talk. And of course, just networking in general, you know, partnerships, collaborators, and so forth. So I leave the floor to you guys.
Al, thank you very much. This is Pradeep again. It was a very thought-provoking talk you gave. Some really visionary ideas and ways to think about the future. I'll open it up for questions. Maybe we have time for one or two really quick questions. And Al, as you said, if you want to share your email, that would be a good thing to do as well. We'll take one or two real quick questions before we thank Al again. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Megan, go ahead.
Why was 3D printing chosen as a solution?
Yeah, great question. So because to free up time, and we feel like people take too much time on tedious things, and 3D printing is going to help automate some of those tedious things, so that then we have more free time to design and create and collaborate and for leisure and social.
I guess there's an opportunity for 3D printing to reduce waste too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, there still needs, I still need to learn a lot more about 3D printing. If there's any experts I would love to hear from you. But you know, PLA seems to be the most promising material because it's recyclable. But it's still, you know, we want to try to build things organically and sustainably. So that's still a challenge. But it's mainly, like you said, less material, more accuracy, but mainly time saving.
Yep.
Hey, Al, you have a
One more
question in the commentary from Amy Starr.
Okay.
Her question is, what solar panel standard are you using? Are you meeting the EU standard for requirements of recyclability of solar?
Yeah, great question. Like, we're actually working on that research right now. So if she wants to help us on that with that research, we would love an intern to help us with that. In my experience, there's only one or two companies that are involved with the program of recycling. So it is really hard because on one end, it's very expensive to buy solar, and I mean, you get your money back. It creates savings. However, if you buy solar panels and then that company disappears, then you're gonna lose your money. So it's very important to pick the right company too, and that's where it gets hard, right? Like, and that's where we all sin and still buy food that is not organic sometimes, or we still use some plastic, and so we still have that same problems in solar. But yeah, we're researching right now on that. There is some programs out there that recycle solar panels, but it's a very, very important topic. Absolutely, not only the recycling of them, but also the manufacturing of them and the transportation.
Excellent. Any other question? One more quick question. Okay, Al has put up his contact information, his email address on the screen. You can jot that down and feel free to reach out to him directly or reach out to him through Kelly if you're interested in any internship opportunities, as he talked about. I want to thank you again, Al. Appreciate all of your effort in putting into the presentation, and that was certainly a very interesting, intriguing, and eye-opening conversation, and opens the eyes to some of our students. So thank you again very much, Al. Kelly, any last
Thank
minute
you.
words?
Yes, I'm very, very grateful. Even though I couldn't see you or hear you, I feel the positive energy from you, and it's a great honor, and I would really love to hear from you. I would love to collaborate, and you know, we share one thing, and that is the environment. And here we have a way that that not only we can learn and get experience, but we can do something very positive to the environment. And so we want to share that passion and time and work with you. And so we'll be very happy to hear from you. Feel free to send me an email, and I'll get back to you ASAP.
Thank you. Kelly, back to you.
So, Al, if I may ask you if it's okay if we can post your slides on our speaker webpage?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, you can.
Kelly, you're muted. Kelly, you're muted.
Thank you. So for everyone, we'll go ahead and post Al's slides and the video for today on the speaker webpage. So those of you that have assignments can reference to those. And we thank you again, Al, for your wonderful presentation, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I look forward to it.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.